It was late at night, but the warm glow of the lamp still spilled out from the small apartment's window. Inside, Ava Vaughn sat on an old wooden chair, her eyes fixed on the computer screen, where countless sent emails remained unanswered. She had reached out to every charity organization, every bank, and every acquaintance she could think of. Yet the response was always the same. "We're sorry, but we can't help you." Ava let her hands fall to her lap, her mind spinning from exhaustion and pressure. Her mother, Margaret Vaughn, lay weakly in a hospital bed, her breathing faint. She needed an urgent surgery to survive. The doctor had been clear. If the surgery isn't performed within the next 2 weeks, her chances of survival will be slim. But the required amount was far too large, a sum that, even if she worked her entire life, she could never gather in such a short time. Ava was not someone who gave up easily. She was strong, intelligent, and had always lived with sincerity. For years, she had done everything in her power to care for her mother, taking on multiple jobs just to provide them with a peaceful life. Her father had passed away when she was just a child. Since then, her mother had been her only family, the one person she could rely on. Despite life's hardships, they had never lost hope, never surrendered to despair. Her mother had always told her, "Life can be tough, but as long as you have a kind heart, you will always find light in the darkness." Ava had lived by those words. She had never done anything that went against her morals, no matter how dire her circumstances became. In the past few days, she had done everything she could. She took on extra shifts at the cafe, where she had only worked part-time before. She was willing to stay up late, wake up early, and force a smile even as dark circles deepened under her exhausted eyes. She sought help from charity organizations, only to be turned away because there were too many other patients in need. She put up ads to sell everything she owned, from her old car to sentimental belongings, just to scrape together whatever she could. But even after exhausting every option, she was still short of a daunting sum. Time was slipping away. Each passing day, her mother grew weaker. Desperation gnawed at her, yet she couldn't allow herself to give up. That night, as she stepped out of the hospital, she looked up at the star-filled sky. The cold night air wrapped around her as she whispered to herself, "Is there any other way? Any path left to save my mother?" Little did she know, that very night an offer would come, one that would change her life forever. Tonight, the Grand Royale Hotel was ablaze with dazzling lights, hosting a lavish charity gala for the elite. The air was thick with the shimmer of extravagant evening gowns, tailored suits, and the crisp clinking of champagne glasses, creating an atmosphere so grand it was almost suffocating. Ava Vaughn stood in a shadowed corner, a tray of drinks in her hands, quietly observing. She did not belong to this world, yet she had to be here. For money, for her mother. She had taken this job as a server at the event, a grueling task, but one that paid well. She moved through the crowd, pouring drinks, serving hors d'oeuvres, blending into the background. But all of that became meaningless the moment he arrived. Jason Knight. The name was legendary in the world of finance. A billionaire, cold, arrogant, wielding unimaginable power. It was said that he could buy an entire corporation with a single nod or destroy someone's career with just a few words. He entered the room with effortless grace, his sharp gaze sweeping over the guests, as though nothing here was worth his attention. The perfectly tailored black suit hugged his tall, commanding frame. His dark hair was slicked back just enough to reveal piercing blue eyes so icy and unreadable that they stripped away any pretense from those who dared to meet them. Everyone in the room noticed him, but Jason didn't care. There was only one person who caught his attention, a server with strong yet sorrowful eyes. Their gazes met, two opposing worlds colliding. Ava didn't realize she was being watched. She continued working, oblivious, until she felt a sharp gaze burning into her. When she turned, she found herself locking eyes with Jason Knight. For a split second, she felt herself drawn into those deep, unreadable eyes, cold as ice, yet holding something unsettling beneath the surface. He said nothing as he reached for a glass of champagne from her tray, his gaze never wavering from her face. "Who are you?" His voice was deep, authoritative. Ava stiffened. She wasn't used to being spoken to this way. "I'm just a server," she replied curtly, attempting to step away. But Jason wasn't about to let her slip away so easily. He took a slow sip of his drink, tilting his head slightly as he studied her. "No," he murmured, as if reaching a quiet conclusion. "You're not like the others here." She frowned, unsure of what he meant. He regarded her for a long moment before a small, knowing smirk tugged at the corner of his lips, a smile that never reached his eyes. "Your eyes," he said softly, as if uncovering something intriguing. "They look like someone who has lost everything, but is still fighting not to fall." Ava froze. Those words. Did he see through her despair? She immediately turned away, wanting to end this strange conversation. But before she could step away, Jason leaned in slightly, his deep voice brushing against her ear, carrying a dangerous edge. "You need money, don't you?" Ava's grip tightened around the tray, her heart stalling for a brief moment. She turned back, her expression guarded. "What are you talking about?" Jason leaned casually against the bar, amusement flickering in his sharp blue eyes. He took another sip of his drink before speaking slowly, as if making a weighty decision. $1 million. Ava's mind went blank. "What did you just say?" $1 million, he repeated, his voice unwavering. "For one night." Every muscle in Ava's body locked up. His offer was like a slap to her dignity. It took her a few seconds to process his words, but when she did, fury ignited inside her, making her entire body tremble. "What?" she hissed, barely containing her anger. "What kind of person do you think I am?" Jason simply smirked, that infuriating, half-amused smirk. "I don't think you're any kind of person," he said smoothly. "Just a desperate girl who needs money, and I'm a man who can give it to you." She couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You think I would agree to this?" Ava spat out, each word laced with disdain. Jason shrugged, completely unfazed. "I don't know." He leaned in slightly, his piercing gaze locking onto hers. "But I do know one thing. When you truly have no other choice, you'll come looking for me." His words sliced through her pride like a blade. She wanted to slap him, to scream that she wasn't for sale, but she did nothing. She simply clenched her fists, her eyes burning with fury before turning and walking away. As she passed him, she heard the quiet, amused chuckle he let out. "I'll be waiting." Blood boiled in her veins. She would never, never accept that offer. But the moment she stepped out of the grand ballroom, faced with the harsh reality waiting for her outside, a single thought crept into her mind. Do I really have any other choice? Ava Vaughn had never felt such despair. After that fateful night at the gala, she buried herself in work, desperately trying to gather the enormous sum needed for her mother's surgery. She took extra shifts at the restaurant, picked up cleaning jobs in the mornings, and even reached out to charities hoping for help. But her efforts barely made a dent. She ran everywhere, borrowing from anyone who might lend her money, but the amount she still needed was far too great. The polite refusals, the sympathetic shakes of the head, the pitying looks, each one weighed heavily on her heart. Every time she returned to their tiny apartment and saw her mother lying in bed, her face pale, her breathing weak, a crushing pain wrapped around her chest. The doctor had warned her, if she doesn't undergo surgery soon, her condition will become critical. Those words echoed in her mind like a death sentence. Outside the hospital, a shattered heart. Light rain drizzled onto the cold pavement, but Ava didn't feel the chill. She stood outside the hospital, her eyes locked on the glass doors leading to the treatment ward where her mother lay. Inside, Margaret Vaughn had fallen asleep from exhaustion, her breath shallow. She had always put on a strong front for Ava, but Ava knew how much pain she was in. She blamed herself. She should have made more money. She should have found another way. But now she was at a dead end. The medical bills flashed in her mind, overlapping with Jason Knight's arrogant voice. $1 million for one night. Ava clenched her fists, her nails digging into her palms so hard it stung. She had sworn she would never accept that offer. But now what choice did she have? The hospital wouldn't give her more time. Her mother's body couldn't hold on much longer. And she knew, if she lost her mother, she would lose everything. Hot tears slipped down her cheeks. She couldn't let that happen. Pride or the only family she had left? Ava bit down on her lips so hard she tasted blood. She didn't want to sell herself. But she couldn't lose her mother. She had always believed she could overcome any hardship with sheer determination and hard work. But fate had cornered her into a place with no escape. She imagined her mother waking up to see her daughter on her knees, begging the doctors for more time. She imagined the day her mother took her last breath, carrying the regret that her daughter had tried her best but still failed. She couldn't let that happen. Ava shut her eyes tightly, took a deep breath, and pulled out her phone. Her hands were shaking so much that it took her a few seconds to dial Jason's number. The digits on the screen burned into her pride, but she refused to let herself hesitate any longer. She pressed call, surrendering to fate. The dial tone rang endlessly. Every second felt like an eternity. Then finally, the deep, familiar voice came through the line. "I was waiting for this call." Ava gritted her teeth, forcing her voice to stay steady. "Do you still stand by your offer?" A long pause, then a quiet chuckle. "Of course." She closed her eyes, swallowing the shame that tightened around her throat. Then she took a deep breath, her heart shattering as she spoke the next words. "I agree." On the other end of the line, Jason smirked. "Good, Ava. I'll send you the address. We meet tonight." Welcome to Soul Stories. When you hear these words, you are now a cherished part of the Soul Stories family, a place where we share heartfelt tales that touch the soul. We deeply appreciate every follow, every encouraging comment, and all the feedback you provide. It is your support that drives us to improve continuously, bringing you stories that are profound, meaningful, and resonate with emotions. Each story is not just a collection of words, it's a small gift meant to bring a little joy and sentiment amidst the chaos of life. We may not always be able to satisfy everyone, but please share your thoughts and wishes with us so we can create even more complete stories and spread happiness to more people. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story. Let's spread love together. Invite your family and friends to join so our community can soon reach 10,000 members. Soul Stories, stories that touch the soul. The luxury car came to a stop before the towering iron gates. Ava looked up at the grand estate before her, a vast, imposing mansion standing alone on an expansive stretch of land. Everything was immaculate, from the perfectly paved driveway to the neatly trimmed lawns. Yet no matter how breathtaking it was, the place exuded an eerie coldness, mirroring the man who had built it. Ava tightened her grip on her hands, taking a deep breath to steady herself before stepping out of the car. She had made this choice. There was no turning back now. The mansion's heavy doors swung open, and an elderly butler bowed slightly. "Miss Vaughn, Mr. Knight is expecting you." Ava nodded and followed him inside. Each step she took echoed against the marble floors, the vast space amplifying the sound. There was no other noise, no sign of life, only the hollow footsteps of her and the butler. No photographs, no personal touches, just a lavish yet lifeless space. There were no traces of warmth in this home. Ava's chest tightened with unease as they stopped before an enormous wooden door that stretched to the ceiling. The butler knocked gently before pushing it open. "Mr. Knight, Miss Vaughn has arrived." The cold-blooded man, Jason Knight, stood by the window, his back turned to her. He didn't need to face her. His deep, steady voice alone was enough to make Ava feel the weight of his presence. "You're right on time." He turned, his icy blue gaze locking onto hers. Under the soft glow of the chandelier, his features were chiseled, sculpted like a work of art, yet there was no warmth in them. Ava swallowed, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Can we get this over with?" she asked, trying to hide the nervous tremor in her voice. Jason stepped closer, his sharp eyes scanning her as if assessing her every move. "You're in a hurry," he smirked faintly. "Relax, Ava. This isn't a business transaction." Her fingers curled into fists. His words were like a dagger slicing through her pride. "You said that after tonight, we would act as if we never knew each other," she said, keeping her voice even. "I just want this to be over as quickly as possible." Jason studied her for a long moment before letting out a low chuckle, one devoid of any real amusement. I'm used to women trying to prolong their time with me. I didn't expect someone who just wants to get it over with. Ava remained silent. She wasn't here to flirt. She wasn't here to get anything from him. She was here for one reason only, to save her mother. Jason narrowed his eyes as if trying to read her thoughts, then turned away to pour himself a drink at the bar. His voice was deep, controlled. I was clear about the terms, Ava. He lifted the glass to his lips, his gaze glinting with a quiet, unreadable intensity. One night. After that, you disappear from my life. Unveiling his true self. Ava took a deep breath, bracing herself for what was to come. She had expected Jason to claim her immediately, to act like the kind of man who took what he wanted without a second thought. But instead, he didn't rush. He didn't pull her into his arms. There was no urgency, no hunger in his gaze. He simply stood there watching her. Then he set his drink down and spoke, his voice low and rough. Do you know why I chose you? Ava frowned. Because I need money. Jason shook his head and stepped closer, though he kept a measured distance. No! His voice was slow, deliberate, his piercing eyes seeming to strip her bare. I chose you because you're different. She blinked, startled. You're not like the women who throw themselves at me for money or power, he murmured, tilting his head slightly. You need the money, but you hate yourself for it. I see it in your eyes. Ava turned her face away, unwilling to meet his gaze any longer. What do you want? She whispered, her voice hoarse. Jason was silent for a long moment before he finally spoke, his words a quiet confession, as if meant only for her. A family! Ava froze. Jason smirked slightly at the confusion in her expression. Just for one night, he murmured. I want to live like a normal man, not a billionaire, not a ruthless businessman. He held her gaze steadily. I want you to cook dinner with me, sit at a table with me, talk to me like we've known each other. Ava couldn't find the words to respond. This was not what she had expected. She had prepared herself to be treated like an object, a transaction. But instead, Jason Knight, the man the world saw as untouchable, heartless, was showing her a side she never thought existed. And that, more than anything, left her feeling more shaken than she ever had before. Ava had barely recovered from Jason's unexpected words when he turned away, striding toward the expansive kitchen. The space was just like the rest of the mansion, luxurious yet cold, devoid of any warmth or signs of life. We're cooking dinner together, he said in his deep, steady voice, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Ava blinked, not sure if she had heard him correctly. You want to cook? Jason raised an eyebrow, something between amusement and challenge flickering in his eyes. Do you think I don't know how? She didn't answer, only followed him into the kitchen in silence. She had heard countless rumors about Jason Knight, a ruthless billionaire who inspired fear wherever he went. But the man standing before her now, he was searching for something else, something softer. Jason pulled open the refrigerator, taking out fresh ingredients and setting them on the counter. Then turning to her, he said, You'll help me prepare dinner. We'll cook together. Ava hesitated, then nodded. This wasn't what she had expected when she agreed to come here, but maybe it was a way to maintain some distance. They began cooking. Ava quietly chopped vegetables while Jason handled the meat and main dishes. The rhythmic sound of the knife hitting the cutting board blended with the sizzling of oil in the pan, creating an unexpectedly warm and peaceful atmosphere, fragments of a painful past. Amid the quiet, Jason suddenly spoke, his voice carrying a weight she hadn't heard before. Have you ever wondered why I live in a house this big, yet there's no trace of life in it? Ava looked up at him, meeting his deep, enigmatic gaze, one that seemed to hold countless untold stories. This house is just a shell, he continued, a hint of bitterness in his voice. It's like me, perfect on the outside, empty on the inside. Ava froze, her hands pausing mid-motion. He went on. When I was a child, my mother left with another man. She abandoned me with my father, a man who never wanted a child in the first place. Every time he looked at me, he was reminded of the woman who walked away from him. Jason's voice grew distant, as if lost in another time. I grew up in that coldness, No love, no affection. I learned that in this world, if you're not strong, if you're not ruthless, no one respects you. Ava's chest tightened as she listened. She had never imagined that behind Jason's arrogance and power was a man shaped by such deep wounds. So you decided to become strong and ruthless, like your father? She asked softly, her voice laced with genuine understanding. Jason turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. Maybe, but no matter how much money or power I have, I still can't fill that emptiness. Ava didn't know how to comfort him. His wounds ran too deep, carved into him over years of loneliness. Two souls, two wounds. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken emotions. Then Ava decided to share a part of herself too. I'm not wealthy. I'm just an ordinary woman living in a tiny apartment, working multiple jobs to survive. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But I was luckier than you, because I had my mother. Jason listened intently, not interrupting. My mother is everything to me, she continued, emotion thick in her voice. She had nothing but love to give. Even in our worst moments, she would smile and tell me that things would get better. She took a deep breath, pain flashing in her eyes. But now she's sick, and no matter how hard I try, I can't save her. Her voice caught and she clenched her fists, swallowing the lump in her throat. That's why I'm here, she admitted, her gaze locking onto Jason's. Not for money, not for ambition, for my mother. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. No judgment, no defenses. Just two broken souls silently recognizing each other's pain. Jason didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned back to the stove, resuming his work. But the air between them had shifted. The cold detachment was gone, replaced by something warmer, something unspoken. Ava felt a strange sense of calm settle over her. She never expected to find herself here, sharing a meal with a man the world saw as untouchable. And yet, beneath his ruthless exterior, Jason Knight was simply alone, a quiet understanding. When dinner was ready, they sat across from each other at the grand dining table. Jason poured her a glass of wine, his imposing presence softened by the flickering candlelight. Thank you for listening, he murmured, his voice lower, gentler. Ava offered him a small smile, sensing something shifting between them, an unspoken connection neither of them had expected. The dinner ended in quiet serenity. Neither of them rushed to leave, and for the first time, neither mentioned the deal that had brought her here. As the golden glow of the chandelier bathed them in warmth, Jason poured them both another glass of wine. Do you like wine? He asked, his deep voice void of the earlier coldness. Ava lifted the glass, watching the crimson liquid swirl before shaking her head. Not really, but sometimes. I think a little wine helps people forget, just for a while. Jason's lips curved into a knowing smirk. True, but do you want to forget tonight? Ava hesitated. She wasn't sure if she wanted to forget, or if she even could. They clinked their glasses together, the soft chime echoing in the quiet room. As she took a slow sip, letting the rich taste linger on her tongue, she realized something. The night was far from over, and Jason Knight was no longer just a name to her. Ava leaned back slightly in her chair, her gaze softening as she looked at Jason. Have you ever thought about your dreams? Jason was caught off guard by the question. He was used to numbers, power, and battles in the corporate world, not dreams. Dreams? He took a sip of his wine, his eyes contemplative. I once dreamed of having a family. Ava frowned slightly. Jason let out a quiet, almost bitter laugh. Sounds contradictory, doesn't it? A man like me, cold, ruthless, once wished for something as simple as a real family? She didn't say anything, only watched him in silence, as if waiting for him to open up more. He placed his glass down, his gaze drifting into the distance. When I was a child, I used to hope my mother would come back, that she had only left for a little while, and one day she would hold me again and tell me it was all just a bad dream. Ava clenched her hands under the table. She didn't know why, but hearing that made her heart ache. But that never happened. Jason let out a soft chuckle, but there was no humor in it, only quiet pain. Instead, I learned not to expect anything, because no one ever stays. A lump formed in Ava's throat. She had never imagined that beneath his icy exterior lay such a deep and unhealed wound. She lowered her voice. Not everyone will leave you. Jason looked at her, something flickering in his eyes, something vulnerable, before he quickly masked it again. He leaned on his hand, studying her. And what about you? What's your dream? Ava smiled faintly, as if reminiscing. Nothing too grand. I just want my mother to get better. I want a peaceful life, doing what I love, with a little house and a garden full of flowers. Jason listened intently. The woman in front of him was different from anyone he had ever met. She wasn't here for his wealth or his status. She simply wanted peace, a dream that, even for her, seemed out of reach. Silence settled between them. Two people who were supposed to be complete opposites now saw fragments of themselves in each other. Ava felt warmth spreading through her, not just from the wine, but from the way Jason was looking at her. His gaze no longer carried its usual cold detachment. Instead, it was gentle. If you could go back, would you change anything? She asked softly. Jason was quiet for a long moment before he finally murmured, Maybe I wouldn't let myself become the man I am now. Ava's eyes widened slightly. For the first time, she wasn't looking at Jason Knight, the ruthless billionaire. She was looking at a man tired of what he had become. And somewhere along the way, the distance between them had disappeared. Jason reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind Ava's ear, his fingers lingering slightly against her cheek. Ava, his voice was low, softer than she had ever heard it. She didn't pull away. She looked into those deep, stormy blue eyes and saw the loneliness he had buried for so long, the longing for something he had never allowed himself to have. They both knew, once they crossed this line, there would be no turning back, but neither of them wanted to stop. Jason leaned in, his lips brushing against hers, not forcefully, not possessively, just gentle, almost hesitant, as if afraid she would disappear. Ava closed her eyes, feeling his breath mix with hers. The kiss started slow, cautious, but quickly deepened, growing more urgent, more desperate. Jason wrapped his arms around her, pulling her closer, as if trying to memorize the way she felt in his arms. And Ava kissed him back, not because of a deal, not because of money, but because, in that moment, she needed this warmth just as much as he did. For a fleeting moment, they forgot everything. Forgot their wounds, forgot logic, forgot what had brought them here. They were just two lonely souls who had found each other for one night, and in that moment, they were a real family. The soft glow of dawn filtered through the heavy curtains, casting a pale light over the vast but empty room. Jason slowly opened his eyes, feeling the lingering warmth beside him. As he turned, his gaze settled on the woman still lost in slumber. Ava lay there, her breathing steady, her face peaceful as if, for one night, all the pain and burdens had faded away. Strands of her soft hair cascaded over her cheek, and her lips were slightly parted, as if lost in a dream. She was unlike any woman he had ever known, untouched by artifice, untainted by pretense. Jason watched her in silence, an unfamiliar turmoil stirring within him. Last night had been nothing more than a transaction, a simple exchange. That was what he had convinced himself. Yet as he looked at Ava curled up beneath the sheets, a strange feeling crept into his chest, a sense of loss as though something vital had slipped through his fingers. There was a gentleness in her that unsettled him, stirring memories he had long buried. The warmth of family, the longing for something real, things he had taught himself to dismiss as foolish fantasies. His hand lifted slightly, hovering just above her cheek. He was tempted to touch her, to trace the softness of her skin, to memorize the warmth she radiated. But then he stopped. He couldn't allow himself to fall into this illusion. Last night had been a mistake, a moment of weakness he could never afford to repeat. An unbreakable rule. His jaw tightened as he clenched his fists, forcing his emotions into submission. He had made the rules clear from the beginning. One night, nothing more. No exceptions. Rising from the bed, Jason moved to the desk, pulled out a checkbook, and without hesitation, signed a check for $1 million. He placed it neatly on the table, a small slip of paper carrying an unforgiving finality. This was the price of last night. This was the end. He buttoned his shirt, smoothing out the fabric with practiced precision. His eyes drifted to Ava once more, lingering for just a second too long. And in that fleeting moment, something sharp twisted in his chest. Regret? Pain? He wasn't sure, but he didn't let himself dwell on it. Without another glance back, Jason turned and walked out of the room. He didn't look back, a heart that ached. When Ava woke, the golden morning light flooded the room. She blinked, slowly adjusting to the quiet stillness that surrounded her. The warmth beside her had faded, but the faint trace of it still lingered on the sheets. Then the eerie silence made her realize he was gone. Ava sat up, her heart pounding. Her gaze swept across the vast emptiness of the room, a cold wave of loneliness washing over her. Then her eyes fell upon the check on the table. $1 million. She swung her legs over the bed, stepping onto the cool floor as she reached for it. The crisp paper felt light in her hands, but the weight of its meaning pressed down on her chest. The numbers stared back at her, stark and undeniable. This was the price of last night. This was all he had left her. A bitter smile ghosted over her lips. She had known this would happen. She had told herself over and over that this was nothing more than a deal, a cold, calculated transaction. But why did it hurt so much? Ava inhaled deeply, willing herself to push down the whirlwind of emotions threatening to consume her. She couldn't allow herself to break. She had to remember why she was here. For her mother. This money would save her mother's life. It would give her a chance to fight, to live. That was all that mattered. Ava tightened her grip on the check, then straightened her shoulders. She would take this money, use it to pay for her mother's treatment, and then she would disappear. No traces, no goodbyes. Because from the very beginning, she and Jason had never been anything more than a cold, fleeting transaction. No matter how much her heart wanted to believe otherwise, Jason Blackwood returned to his office as if nothing had happened. The towering Blackwood Group headquarters operated with its usual efficiency. Employees bowed respectfully as he walked past. Back-to-back meetings filled his schedule with no room for even a moment's pause, and million-dollar deals were signed with his usual unwavering decisiveness. Everything functioned as it always had. No one noticed that something within Jason had changed. He remained the same cold, calculating CEO, the man every competitor feared, the man who thrived in an unforgiving world of power and control. He still worked tirelessly, still made ruthless decisions without hesitation. But only he knew nothing was the same anymore. A hollow emptiness gnawed at him, a wound that refused to heal. And the cause of it was the woman he had paid to walk out of his life. Avenue. Every night, Jason found himself standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, a glass of whiskey in hand, staring into the city lights that never seemed to dim. He closed his eyes, but instead of contracts and numbers, he saw her. He saw the warmth in her eyes, the quiet strength hidden beneath her pain. He remembered the way she smiled when they cooked together, the way she had listened to him speak of his past without judgment, the way her touch had lingered on him, not out of obligation, but out of something real. And most of all, he remembered that moment the next morning when she had still been asleep beside him, serene, delicate, as if she had always belonged there. He shook his head, reminding himself that it had only been one night, a simple transaction. But if it had been so simple, why couldn't he forget her? Trying to forget and failing. Jason did everything in his power to drown himself in work, using it as an escape from the emotions he refused to acknowledge. He took on new projects, filled every spare moment with meetings, business trips, and endless negotiations. He forced himself to be busier than ever, hoping exhaustion would leave no room for thoughts of her. He even attempted to return to the meaningless relationships of his past, the type of women who understood the rules, who craved his wealth but never his time, who never asked for anything more than what he was willing to give. But none of them made him feel anything. Every time he tried to be with another woman, he saw Ava. He saw the way she had looked at him, not with admiration for his power, but with an understanding that had stripped him bare. No matter how hard he tried, every effort was useless. Ava hadn't just left an impression. She had carved herself into him, into a place no one had ever touched before. But she was gone, and perhaps he would never find her again. Losing control. Jason Blackwood was not a man who accepted powerlessness. His entire life had been built on control, over his empire, over his emotions, over every move he made. He never allowed himself to be at the mercy of anyone. Yet now, for the first time, he felt utterly powerless. Ava had disappeared as if she had never existed. And Jason did what he always did when he wanted something. He ordered his team to find her. His investigators scoured every possible trace of her. They checked bank transactions, hospital records, hotel bookings, any sign that she had left behind. But there was nothing. She had no suspicious financial activity, no fixed address, no personal phone usage. It was as if she had vanished completely. Jason's temper boiled over when the first report arrived, his fury erupting as he shattered his whiskey glass against the marble floor. "Impossible," he snarled, his voice low and dangerous. "She can't just disappear?" But she had, and it drove him insane. He couldn't understand why he was this angry. He had wanted her to leave. He had set the terms, had given her the check, had told himself that this was exactly how it was meant to end. He should have moved on. He should have gone back to the life he had always known, unburdened, detached, untouched. But instead, his heart betrayed him. He wanted to see her. He wanted to know where she was. He wanted to hear her voice, to look into her eyes again. More than anything, he wanted her back. And the more he searched with no results, the more it felt like he was spiraling into something he couldn't control. A man without a way out. The days that followed turned him into something unrecognizable. His employees tiptoed around him, wary of his volatile moods. A single mistake in the office was enough to set him off, his patience razor thin. He worked harder, pushed himself past his limits, as if drowning himself in contracts and negotiations would fill the gaping hole inside him. But no matter how much he tried to bury her under the weight of his work, the moment night fell, she was there. Her soft laughter echoed in his mind. Her touch lingered on his skin, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw her walking away, carrying a piece of him she didn't even know she had taken. Time passed, and Jason was forced to accept a bitter truth. Ava was gone. He couldn't find her. No one could. And that only meant one thing: she didn't want to be found. The realization cut deeper than he expected. But Jason Blackwood was not a man who chased what had already left. If she had chosen to disappear, then he would not search for her anymore, even if his heart screamed for him to keep looking. Even if every morning he woke up hoping for a message, a phone call, anything. Even if every night he caught himself listening for footsteps that would never come. He would force himself to forget, because he had no other choice. After her mother's surgery, Ava left the bustling city behind and moved to a small coastal town, a place where no one knew her past. More importantly, it was a place where she could fulfill the terms of that fateful night's agreement. With the money she had received from that one night, she not only covered her mother's medical expenses, but also opened a small bakery, a dream she had once cherished but never dared to pursue. The bakery was modest, nestled on the town's main street, with a hand-painted wooden sign hanging above the entrance. Every morning, the sweet aroma of freshly baked pastries filled the air, inviting passers-by into a warm and welcoming space. It was a simple life, but for the first time in a long while, Ava felt a sense of peace. Her mother had recovered, though she still needed rest and had to avoid overexertion. Yet she was well enough to sit by the window with a warm cup of tea, watching her daughter move around the bakery with quiet contentment. Ava allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, things would finally be okay. But fate had other plans. 2 months later, exhaustion crept up on Ava, but she brushed it off, assuming it was just the weight of running a business and the lingering stress from the past months. Then came the nausea, the dizziness, and when she realized she had missed her cycle for nearly 2 months, a strange fear gripped her chest. Her hands trembled as she purchased a pregnancy test from the pharmacy, her heart pounding as she returned home. In the quiet of her small room, she stood frozen, staring at the 2 bright red lines on the test strip. She was pregnant. The air seemed to vanish from the room, and the world around her blurred. Her fingers went numb, and for a moment, she nearly dropped the test. Her lips parted, but no words came out. A battle between heart and mind. She didn't know how long she sat there motionless, her heart hammering against her ribs. A storm of emotions swirled inside her, fear, uncertainty, but beneath it all, an inexplicable warmth. Inside her, a tiny life was forming, a part of her and a part of him. Jason Blackwood. His name echoed in her mind, making her close her eyes and take a deep breath. She had never expected their fates to remain entwined in this way. Yet despite the overwhelming shock, she did not regret it. Ava knew that this child was the result of a night she could never forget. It hadn't been a love story, nor had their meeting been anything more than an agreement. But that night, that single fleeting moment, had been the most real thing she had ever experienced. And now she had a piece of Jason with her forever. But just as a fragile sense of happiness bloomed within her, a terrifying thought shattered it. He would never accept this. Jason Blackwood was not a man who believed in love, nor was he someone who allowed emotional attachments to tie him down. If he knew about the baby, would he take the child from her? He was a billionaire with unlimited resources, capable of bending the law and people to his will. If he wanted, he could claim the child as his, treating it as his possession, his responsibility, but never his family. Ava could not allow that to happen. She could not let her child grow up in a world where love was secondary to power, where a father saw his own child as nothing more than a name on a contract. Her hand instinctively rested on her stomach, over the tiny life growing within her. She would raise this child alone. She would give it the love and warmth she had known from her own mother, ensuring it never felt unwanted or neglected. She would protect it from the cold, unfeeling world Jason Blackwood thrived in. She didn't need him. She didn't need a man who had already proven that his heart was impenetrable. It would be just her and her baby starting a new life together, a life filled with love, free from anything or anyone who could take that happiness away from them. And so Ava made her decision. She would never let Jason know. The endless blue sea stretched to the horizon, sunlight dancing over the rippling waves as they kissed the soft shore. Along the coast, the seaside town buzzed with life. Tourists strolling along the beach, street cafes filled with laughter, and children's playful squeals echoing in the warm air. Jason Blackwood had no patience to appreciate any of it. He walked along the wooden boardwalk lining the beach, having just concluded an important business meeting with local investors. As expected, the negotiations had gone flawlessly, his sharp mind and ruthless precision leaving no room for failure. Yet despite another professional victory, his mind was far from at ease. For years, he had buried himself in work, using it as a shield against emotions he refused to acknowledge. But no matter how much he tried to move forward, one image refused to leave him: the clear, haunting eyes of the woman from that night. Avenue. She had disappeared from his life completely, vanishing without a trace. He had searched, desperately, relentlessly. Every resource at his disposal had led to a dead end. Eventually, he had been forced to stop looking, to accept the impossible. She was gone. But despite the years that had passed, he had not forgotten her. And now, just when he least expected it, fate was about to change everything. An unexpected encounter. Jason was walking down a narrow street near the beach when suddenly, thud! A small body collided with him, followed by the unmistakable sensation of something cold spilling down the front of his expensive shirt. His sharp gaze dropped down, a frown forming as he registered the sight before him. A young boy, no more than 5 or 6 years old, stood there, clutching an empty juice cup in his tiny hands. His wide eyes darted from Jason's now stained black shirt to the growing puddle of liquid on the pavement. The boy's lips pressed together as if weighing his next move. Then, with an adorably serious expression, he looked up and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, mister." His voice was clear and polite, tinged with slight worry. Jason narrowed his eyes, about to issue a curt reprimand, when his gaze locked onto the boy's face. And his world stopped. A shocking recognition. The boy had piercing blue eyes, not just any shade of blue, Jason's blue. Cold and sharp, the very same gaze he saw in the mirror every morning. Dark brown hair, high cheekbones, a strong brow. The way he scrunched his nose in concentration, the serious set of his little jaw. It was like looking at a smaller version of himself. A storm erupted in Jason's chest, his heartbeat hammering in a way it never had before. His breath caught, his body tense as a terrifying, impossible realization struck him. The boy, oblivious to Jason's turmoil, was now dabbing a napkin against his soaked shirt, muttering under his breath. "Mom says when you make a mistake, you should say sorry and fix it. But your shirt is black, so I guess it's not too bad, right?" Jason flinched. "Mom." His mind latched onto the word, his entire body coiling with tension. His fists clenched instinctively as he forced himself to speak. "What's your name?" His voice was rougher than intended, thick with emotions he couldn't yet name. The boy glanced up at him, tilting his head in a way that seemed far too mature for his small frame. His big blue eyes studied Jason intently, as if sizing him up. Then, with a mischievous glint, he grinned and said, "Mom says I shouldn't talk to strangers." Jason was momentarily thrown off by the defiant response. But before he could react, the boy beamed and added, "But you don't look like a bad guy." Jason's jaw tightened. He was losing control of the conversation, something that never happened to him. "Where's your mother?" he demanded, his voice quieter but no less urgent. The boy hesitated. Then, tilting his head thoughtfully, he flashed another playful grin. "Not telling." And with that, he turned and bolted. The world shifts. Jason stood frozen as he watched the boy weave effortlessly through the crowd, his small figure vanishing between rows of seaside houses. His legs refused to move. His breath came shallow and uneven. The roar of the waves and the voices around him faded into nothingness. All he could see was that face, those eyes, and a single thought consumed his mind. "Is that my son?" A storm that could not be stopped. Jason Blackwood was not a man who let things go easily, especially not when a child with his eyes had appeared before him. The entire night after his encounter with the boy on the beach, he didn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the child's dark brown hair, the sharp blue gaze that mirrored his own, the innocent yet strangely observant expression that had unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. Who was that boy? Was he Jason's son? Jason didn't believe in coincidences. His instincts, sharpened by years of navigating ruthless business negotiations, told him that there was a truth being kept from him. And if there was one thing he despised more than anything else, it was being lied to. The search for the truth. By morning, he had already set his investigative team to work. Within hours, a file landed on his desk. He scanned the document quickly, his sharp eyes devouring every line until he saw her name, Ava Vaughn. For a moment, the air seemed to leave the room. His grip tightened around the papers, his pulse pounding in his ears. Her, the woman who had disappeared without a trace, the woman he had tried for years to forget, but never could. She had been here all this time, in a quiet seaside town, running a small bakery. And more importantly, she had given birth to a child, his child. A powerful surge of emotions slammed into him. Anger, betrayal, disbelief, and something else, something deeper that he refused to name. She had left him. She had vanished, taking their child with her, keeping this secret from him for all these years. Did she think he would never find out? His jaw clenched, his hands curling into fists. That was a mistake. Standing abruptly, he grabbed his coat and strode toward the door. His voice was sharp, commanding. "Prepare the car." His assistant barely had time to react before Jason was already walking out. "We're going to see Ava Vaughn." A confrontation long overdue. The sleek black car rolled to a stop in front of a small, unassuming bakery, nestled in the heart of the peaceful town. Jason stepped out, his gaze locking onto the wooden sign hanging above the door. Ava's little bakery. His breath came heavier. She was really here. For 5 years, she had been living a life without him, without a single word, without a single trace. She had built something, a world where he did not exist. A storm of emotions raged in his chest, but he pushed them aside. Not yet. Drawing a deep breath, he stepped inside. A small bell rang softly, announcing his arrival. Ava was behind the counter, carefully arranging pastries on a tray. She wore a simple beige dress, her long hair pulled into a loose ponytail, a dark green apron tied around her waist. Strands of hair had fallen over her forehead, and flour dusted the tips of her fingers. She looked peaceful, as if she hadn't once turned her back on him and walked away, as if she hadn't been hiding his child from him. Then she turned, and everything froze. The moment their eyes met, Ava's welcoming smile faded instantly, her breath caught, her fingers tightening around the cloth she had been holding. Jason Blackwood. The name echoed in her mind like a warning, like a past she had fought so hard to bury. And yet, there he was, standing in her bakery, looking at her like a storm barely held at bay. He had barely changed. The same powerful, imposing presence, the same chiseled features, the same piercing blue eyes. But something was different. The anger was expected. The sharp edge in his voice was expected. But what she had not expected was the hurt lurking beneath his fury. Ava barely had time to react before Jason took a step closer, his deep voice cutting through the space between them. "Is there something you'd like to tell me, Ava?" She froze and her stomach twisted painfully. She didn't need to ask what he meant. She already knew. Jason knew. Ava struggled to keep her breathing steady, but her hands trembled. She bit her lip, searching for the right words. Any words. But her throat had gone dry. I don't know what you're talking about." Jason let out a cold, humorless laugh. "Really?" His voice was dangerously low. "Then let me spell it out for you. Yesterday, a boy ran into me. He spilled juice on my shirt, and when I looked into his eyes..." He took another step forward, forcing Ava to tilt her head up to meet his gaze. "I saw myself." Ava inhaled sharply. Her worst fear had become a reality. He had seen their son. She had to stay strong. She couldn't let him take control. "Jason, this has nothing to do with you." She forced her voice to be steady. "My life, my decisions, they don't concern you anymore." But Jason didn't back down. He moved even closer, his presence overwhelming, his breath warm against her skin. "Nothing to do with me." His voice was a low growl. "Ava, that boy is my son." Her fingers clenched into fists. She couldn't deny it, but she couldn't admit it either, because she knew Jason Blackwood. He was powerful. He was controlling. And if he truly knew, he would never let her raise their child alone. He would take him. Her eyes burned, but she refused to show weakness. "I don't owe you an explanation." She lifted her chin defiantly, meeting his furious gaze. Jason's jaw tensed. His eyes darkened, the storm within them growing wilder. Then his voice dropped into a dangerous whisper. "Then I'll find the answers myself." And before she could react, he turned and strode out the door. Ava stood frozen, her heart pounding in terror. She knew he wasn't going to stop. He had found her once. And this time, Jason Blackwood would not let her disappear again. A man who never waited, now willing to fight. Jason Blackwood had never been a patient man. His entire life had been built on control, on making decisions that shaped his world exactly the way he wanted. But now, standing in front of Ava Vaughn, the woman who had taken his child from him for 7 years, he felt something he had never experienced before. Complete loss of control. He couldn't believe she had walked away without a word, leaving behind an emptiness inside him he had never even realized was there. And now his son, his own flesh and blood, had grown up without him. Jason took a deep breath, his icy blue eyes locking onto Ava's with an intensity that made the air between them heavy. His voice, low but commanding, cut through the space like a blade. "You and our son are coming back to the city with me." Ava's grip on the towel in her hand tightened, but her stance remained firm. "No!" Her refusal made Jason's jaw tighten. His expression darkened, his voice turning sharper, colder. "Ava, do you really think you can stop me?" But she didn't flinch. 7 years had turned her into a stronger woman, one who had learned how to fight for her child. "Jason, I don't belong in your world. Neither does our son. I won't let him grow up in a place where love is a luxury." Her words hit like a dagger straight into his chest. Did she really believe that? Did she really think he was incapable of love? Jason had spent his entire life being perceived as ruthless, heartless, a man who saw emotions as nothing more than weaknesses. He was used to it. But hearing it from her, from the only woman who had ever truly mattered, felt like a wound that refused to close. He stepped closer, his voice dropping, filled with restrained anger and something deeper, something raw. Ava, my son has a right to know his father, and I will not stand on the sidelines. Hate me if you want, but don't take him away from me. Ava bit her lip, struggling for a response. She hated how much his words affected her, because he was right. Theo deserved a father. But what if Jason wasn't the kind of father their son needed? What if he appeared only to leave again? She couldn't risk her son getting attached to someone who might walk away. Do you really think you can just show up and change everything? Her voice shook slightly, emotion thick in her throat. You don't know him, Jason. You don't know how he's grown, what he's been through. You think he'll just accept you like that? Jason stilled. She was right. He had never been a father. He had no idea what it meant to be one. But when he had seen Theo, when he had seen himself in that little boy, he knew he couldn't let him go. For the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting for money, power, or control. He was fighting for his son, the start of something new. Jason didn't force Ava to leave with him. Instead, he took a different approach. He started getting to know his son. At first, Theo regarded him with cautious curiosity. He didn't know who this man was, but there was something familiar about him. The way he spoke, the way he carried himself, the way he looked at him. One day, as Jason sat at a table outside the bakery, Theo approached him with his usual bright-eyed innocence. Are you one of Mommy's friends? Jason's throat tightened. Friends? He had never been anyone's friend before. Still, he managed a small smirk. Maybe, but I'd like to be your friend, Theo. Theo tilted his head, considering. Do you like cookies? The boy asked, as if it were the most important question in the world. Mom makes the best cookies. I can share some with you if you like. Jason chuckled, an unfamiliar but genuine sound that had been missing from his life for far too long. Theo was so much like Ava, warm, thoughtful, and far too kind for his own good. Day by day, Jason became a presence in Theo's life. He listened to the boy chatter about school, about his friends, about the stories he made up in his head. And with each passing moment, Jason saw how special his son was. Theo wasn't just smart, he was full of life, full of love. He adored his mother, smiled at the smallest joys, and carried a heart far too big for a child his age. One afternoon, as Jason sat on a bench in front of the bakery, Theo climbed up beside him, holding out a cookie. Mr. Alex, the boy said, using the name Jason had given him, do you want to be my best friend? Jason froze. Best friend? No one had ever asked him that before. No one had ever wanted him to be anything more than a businessman, a billionaire, a deal maker. And yet, here was this child, his child, offering him something far greater. Jason looked down at the boy, his chest tightening with something he didn't yet know how to name. He didn't just want to be Theo's friend, he wanted to be his father. Winning back the woman who once walked away. Jason Blackwood had never fought for anything outside of business. He had never needed to. But Ava Vaughn was different. She didn't care about his wealth. She wasn't impressed by his power. The only way he could win her back was through something real. So for the first time in his life, he changed. No longer the cold and ruthless man who dictated people's lives, he showed up at the bakery every day, not to demand, but to be present. He sat at the counter and drank the coffee she made. He watched her move, noticing the way she bit her lip when she concentrated, the way her eyes softened when she looked at their son. When she was busy, he helped move chairs, wipe down tables, things he had never done in his life. He took care of her mother, ensuring she had her medicine, checking on her health. Even though the older woman still regarded him with suspicion, he never once wavered. He was patient, and slowly Ava saw the change. She saw it when Theo got sick, and Jason was the first to rush him to the hospital in the middle of the night. She saw it when she overworked herself, and Jason silently placed a cup of ginger tea on the counter. No words, just quiet understanding. She saw it when a storm hit the town, and Jason showed up at her door with blankets and food, making sure they were safe. He wasn't forcing his way in. He wasn't buying his place in their lives. He was earning it. And no matter how hard she tried to keep her heart locked away, Ava was falling for him all over again. Could she give him another chance? The man she had once feared would take her child away. The man she had once believed to be incapable of love had become someone different. And for the first time in 7 years, Ava began to wonder, could she give him a chance? Love that endures. Ava had once believed she could never trust Jason again, but he didn't try to win her back with money or power. He used his heart. He showed her through actions, not words. He learned how to bake from her, even though his clumsy hands left flour all over his expensive dress shirts. He picked Theo up from school, played ball with him, and tucked him in at night with bedtime stories. He was no longer the cold and ruthless billionaire. He was a father, a man who knew how to love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ava stood on the shore and watched. Jason carried Theo on his shoulders, laughter ringing through the air as the boy gripped his father's hands, his giggles blending with the rhythmic crashing of the waves. For the first time in years, Ava felt no fear. She had loved Jason once. She had never stopped. And now, as she watched him with their son, she knew it was time to walk toward him, not away. A proposal under the setting sun. That evening, a mysterious message arrived from Jason. Meet me at the beach at sunset. When she arrived, her breath caught. The shoreline was illuminated by twinkling lights, a delicate path of rose petals leading toward a small table set near the water's edge. At its center, beneath the amber glow of the dying sun, rested a small velvet box. Ava's eyes filled with tears before she even saw him. Jason stood a few feet away, dressed in an elegant white suit, his piercing blue eyes filled with love. As she approached, he took a deep breath and dropped to one knee. His voice, deep and steady, carried over the gentle ocean breeze. Ava, you are the only woman who has ever taught me what love truly means. I once believed I was incapable of loving anyone, but you and our son changed me. I don't want to live another day without you by my side. Marry me so we never have to be apart again. Tears streamed down Ava's cheeks, not from pain, but from pure happiness. She looked at the man in front of her, the man who had once broken her heart, but who had also become the only one who could mend it. This time she wasn't afraid. This time she knew he truly loved her. With a trembling smile, she nodded. Yes, I will marry you. The second she spoke the words, Jason pulled her into his arms, sealing their love with a kiss that tasted of promise, of redemption, of forever. A wedding by the sea. They married in an intimate ceremony by the shore, surrounded only by those who truly mattered. Ava walked barefoot across the warm sand, dressed in a simple yet breathtaking white gown, her hand entwined with Jason's. Ahead of them, Theo ran ahead, laughing, free, whole. Under the vast blue sky, with the waves whispering their blessing, they exchanged vows. No more distance, no more misunderstandings, only love. From this day forward, we will never be apart again. A family finally whole. After the wedding, Ava and Jason returned to the city, not as two separate souls, but as a family. The once cold penthouse now overflowed with warmth, with laughter, with life. Ava no longer felt out of place because she belonged here. Jason no longer felt alone because he had the love he never knew he needed. And Theo had what every child deserved, both a mother and a father. One quiet afternoon, they returned to the beach where it had all begun. Jason wrapped Ava in his arms while Theo sat at their feet, building sandcastles with the pure joy only a child could know. Ava rested her head against Jason's shoulder, breathing in the scent of salt, of warmth, of home. Jason intertwined their fingers, his voice a gentle murmur against her hair. Thank you for coming back to me. Ava smiled, squeezing his hand. Thank you for never giving up. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, no longer carrying the weight of past pain, but the peace of the present and the promise of the future. They had lost each other once, But love had brought them back together. And this time, they would never let go. Love can heal even the deepest wounds. This story is a testament that true love has the power to heal, to change, to endure. Ava had the courage to face her past and embrace a love greater than her fears. Jason, once a man of ice, had learned that the greatest wealth in life was not power, but love. Together, they built something that neither money nor status could ever buy: a family. Because in the end, happiness is not about riches. It's about love, patience, and the willingness to open your heart one more time. Thank you for following this story. Let us know what you thought, and don't forget to subscribe for more emotional and powerful stories. Leave a comment. Share this story with others. Stay tuned for the next one. Until next time, love always wins.